I never thought the worst day of my life would begin with an email. It wasn't even a face-to-face conversation. Just a cold 2-paragraph email that landed in my inbox at 9:03 a.m. Subject: Organizational restructuring. Body. Kimberly, your position has been eliminated effective immediately. Please return all company equipment by Friday. I read it 3 times, hoping I'd misunderstood. I hadn't. 7 years. 7 years of late nights, skipped vacations, and pouring every ounce of my energy into that job. And it ended with 2 paragraphs that barely took 30 seconds to read. No meeting, no warning, just gone. I sat frozen at my desk, the hum of the office suddenly deafening. I looked around at my coworkers, many of whom were already packing up boxes, their faces pale and shell-shocked. I wasn't the only one. They'd cut nearly half the department. When my manager finally appeared, avoiding eye contact, mumbling that it's been a difficult decision, I realized no one was coming to save me. I gathered my things in a flimsy cardboard box, feeling like I was moving out of my own life. I walked past the glass doors I'd entered so confidently every morning, now feeling like a ghost. I drove home in silence, replaying every mistake I might have made, every deadline I might have missed, even though I knew, deep down, I had done nothing wrong. It wasn't personal, but it felt personal. It felt like I had been discarded. For the first few days, I told myself I just needed a breather. I slept in. I organized my closet. I convinced myself I'd bounce back quickly. Someone with my experience couldn't possibly be out of work for long. But then I started sending out applications, dozens of them, without a single callback. The rejection emails started trickling in like tiny paper cuts. We've chosen to move forward with other. Each one chipped away at my confidence. At first, I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to worry them, didn't want to seem like I couldn't handle it. I wanted to solve it before they even knew there was a problem. But the bills didn't care about my pride, rent, utilities, student loans. They all kept coming right on schedule. I remember standing in my kitchen one night, staring at a nearly empty fridge, realizing I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I needed help. That's when I picked up the phone to call my family. Growing up, I always assumed family would be the safety net beneath me. But as I dialed my mother's number, I felt the first pang of uncertainty. What if they didn't catch me? What if the net had holes? My mother's voice was warm at first. She asked how I was, how work was going. I told her the truth that I had been laid off, that I was struggling. There was a brief pause on the other end. "Oh, Kim, that's really unfortunate," she said, but her tone shifted just slightly. "Your father and I are managing a lot right now with Brandon's family staying over. It's a full house, and you know how tight things are with the grandkids' expenses." I told her I didn't need to move in. I just needed some help covering rent for 1 month. I promised I'd pay her back. Her response was polite but firm. "Honey, maybe this is a good time for you to reevaluate your spending habits. Sometimes these setbacks are life's way of teaching us a lesson." I hung up feeling smaller than I had in years. Brandon was next. I didn't hesitate because I had been there for him when he lost his job 2 years prior. I had loaned him money without even thinking about it. I had canceled weekend plans to help him move when he was evicted. He answered the call like I was an annoying telemarketer. "Kim, listen, I'm slammed." What's up? I explained everything. His silence stretched on the line. Kim, I have 2 kids, a mortgage, daycare. I can't take on your problems too. I reminded him that I wasn't asking him to take on anything, just a temporary loan like I'd given him before. You were the one always bragging about being independent, he snapped. Maybe it's time to prove it. That night, I sat in the dark, the weight of reality pressing on my chest like a cinder block. The people I thought would cushion my fall didn't just step aside, they actively turned away. I sent one last message to Brandon. Can we at least meet up for lunch? I'd really like to talk in person. He never responded. The next few days were a blur. I stopped opening the bills that piled up in my mailbox. I stopped answering calls from unknown numbers because I knew they were from the leasing office or the credit card company. I started pawning my furniture first, the things I didn't use often, then the things I did. My apartment grew emptier, but my mind grew heavier. The worst part wasn't the financial fear, it was the loneliness. It was the realization that I could vanish from my family's life, and they wouldn't notice until it inconvenienced them. There's a particular kind of heartbreak that comes when you realize you've been emotionally evicted from your own family. I had spent years believing they were my safety net. Turns out I was standing over a cliff with nothing but thin air beneath me. And as terrifying as that was, it was also the beginning. The beginning of learning how to stand on my own, even if I had to start from nothing. I used to believe family would always be there. It was this quiet assumption I'd carried my whole life, like a thread tying me to something safe. But that thread unraveled faster than I could have ever imagined. When I lost my job, I wasn't just losing a paycheck. I was losing my balance, my routine, my sense of self-worth. I told myself it was temporary. I updated my resume, applied for dozens of positions, networked relentlessly. But the rejections piled up like unpaid bills. As the days blurred into weeks, my bank account thinned until rent became a question mark instead of a guarantee. It wasn't pride that drove me to call my family. It was desperation. I hadn't spoken to them much in recent years, but in my mind, they would step up. They'd remind me that I wasn't alone. I called my mother first. I can still hear the stiffness in her voice when she answered. I told her I was struggling, that I just needed some temporary help, a little support to get me through the month, while I kept searching for work. There was a long pause. Then came her response, delicate but sharp. Oh, honey, we're so sorry you're going through this. Really, we are, but your father and I just can't help you financially. Things are tight here too, with Brandon's family and all. Besides, have you tried cutting back on those expensive oat milk lattes? I blinked, stunned. I hadn't bought a coffee from a shop in months. I'd been living on instant coffee and discounted soup cans. But before I could explain, she rushed to wrap the conversation up. We'll pray for you, sweetheart. You're strong. You'll figure it out. I hung up in silence. I moved on to my brother Brandon. Surely he'd understand. I had helped him in the past when he was between jobs, loaned him money to cover his car payments, even babysat his kids for free so he could go to interviews. But when I called him, his voice was already lined with impatience. Kim, I've got a family to feed. Kids. Mortgage. I can't carry you too. I reminded him that I wasn't asking to be carried. I just needed a small loan to get through one more rent cycle. I promised to pay it back. You should have planned better, he snapped. You're lucky you don't have anyone depending on you. I've got real responsibilities. Those words sliced through me like ice. Real responsibilities. As if my life, my survival somehow didn't qualify. The next morning, I texted him again, asking if we could meet, maybe just talk about it over lunch. He left me unread. The silence that followed was suffocating. No callbacks, no check-ins, no offers to help. I spiraled. I pawned my old jewelry, sold my furniture piece by piece until my apartment felt like a hollowed-out shell. I remember the humiliation of standing in line at a donation center to ask about temporary shelter options, realizing I had nowhere else to go. I thought maybe my family needed to see me. Maybe they needed to witness how far I'd fallen before they could understand the urgency. So I asked if I could come over for dinner, just to talk. When I arrived, the atmosphere was thick with awkwardness. Brandon's wife, Jessica, barely looked up from her phone. My mother served dinner like it was any other Sunday, like I hadn't just told them I was weeks away from homelessness. I explained everything. I told them I'd been applying to jobs every day. I told them I wasn't spending on anything unnecessary. I told them I wasn't looking for charity. I just needed a little time. Jessica rolled her eyes so hard I thought they'd get stuck. "You millennials are all the same," she muttered, stabbing her salad. "Always one step away from disaster. Because you can't manage your money." My father checked his watch repeatedly. My mother suggested that maybe I should start thinking seriously about finding a husband. "A good man could help you with these things," she said, with a too sweet smile. But it was Brandon who delivered the final blow. "We have real families to look after. You only have yourself." I felt the table shake beneath my fingertips. I wanted to scream that I had looked after him once, that I had lent him money without hesitation when he needed it. But instead, I just stared at my plate, swallowing everything, the food, the humiliation, the grief. When I got home that night, my apartment was empty. But the weight in my chest was unbearable. My phone buzzed the next morning. It was Brandon. For a heartbeat, I thought maybe he had reconsidered. His message was short. "Don't contact us again until you've got your life together. We can't keep bailing you out." It's embarrassing. I sat on my floor phone in hand numb. They had never bailed me out. Not once. Not a single dollar. In that moment, the last thread snapped. And as painful as it was, I realized something brutal. Sometimes the people you think are your safety net are the very ones who will cut the rope when you're hanging over the edge. That's when I understood family isn't always who you were born with. Sometimes family is the people you haven't met yet, the ones who will show up when it costs them something. But I wasn't there yet. Not then. Back then, all I had was an empty apartment, a car, and a long, lonely road ahead. Rock bottom isn't just a place. It's a state of mind where you have two options: give up or start climbing. The days after my family cut me off felt like I was walking through a fog I couldn't escape. I didn't know what hunger would feel like when it became a constant. I didn't know how heavy a silence could be when it replaced every voice I thought would comfort me. I didn't know the weight of truly being on my own until I was. My apartment, once full of life and color, became an echo chamber of my failure. I sold the couch first, then the dining table, then the TV. My bookshelf sat empty, the pages of my old favorite novels now sold for pennies at a garage sale. One by one, I stripped my space of the things that had made it feel like home, clinging to the hope that if I just stretched the dollars a little further, I could make it through another month. But the numbers didn't lie. The rent would swallow me whole no matter how many thrift store runs I made to offload my belongings. I packed my essentials into the back of my aging sedan, a couple changes of clothes, my worn laptop, a pillow, a blanket, and a box of small sentimental items I refused to give up. I left everything else behind. The first night I slept in my car, I parked in the corner of a 24-hour grocery store lot. I thought if I tucked myself under a streetlight, I'd feel safer. I didn't. I barely slept, jolting awake at every passing headlight, terrified someone would knock on my window or worse. I learned quickly which parking lots allowed overnight stays, how to blend in without raising suspicion, how to make my car look less like a home and more like just another parked vehicle. I kept a gym membership not for the treadmill, but for the showers. I became an expert in navigating public restrooms, brushing my teeth in the smallest, least crowded ones, pretending I was just passing through. Food became a daily calculation. How much could I spend while still having enough gas to make it to job interviews? Protein bars, day-old bakery items, instant oatmeal I made with lukewarm tap water. Those became staples. But it wasn't just the physical discomfort that broke me. It was the silence. My phone didn't ring. No one checked in. I had disappeared, and no one seemed to notice. I spent my days in the public library sending out job applications like lifelines. I must have applied to 100 positions more, maybe. Each time I polished my resume, rehearsed my talking points, forced myself to sound upbeat in emails. But most of the time, I never heard back. I stopped checking my reflection. I didn't want to see the exhaustion that had carved itself into my face. I didn't want to acknowledge the girl I'd become. Then, one afternoon, while scrolling through job listings in my corner of the library, I heard someone say my name. Kimberly. I turned around, startled, and saw Elena Moore. A familiar face from what felt like another life, a former classmate from my business certification program years ago. "Wow, it's really you," she smiled. "How have you been?" That simple question nearly unraveled me. I wanted to tell her everything, to spill the unbearable weight I'd been carrying. But the words got trapped in my throat, so I forced a practiced smile. "Just in between things right now." She didn't press. Instead, she asked if I wanted to grab a coffee. I hesitated, mentally counting the coins in my pocket. "Sure," I said, praying the smallest drink wouldn't wipe me out. We walked to a nearby cafe and sat down. I tried to keep the conversation light, but Elena saw through it. Eventually, the dam broke and the truth tumbled out. The layoff, the eviction, the car, the silence from my family. Her expression didn't shift to pity. It softened into something warmer, something I hadn't felt in months, genuine care. "Kim, listen, I'm working at this startup. We're small, but I know we need people. It's nothing like your old salary, but it's something. Would you be open to an interview?" Hope flickered a tiny spark against the overwhelming darkness. I said yes. Of course, I said yes. She also offered to let me crash on her couch for a few nights, while I figured things out. I almost declined out of pride, but the thought of one full night's sleep on something other than a car seat broke me. That first night on Elena's couch, I cried quietly, not because I was sad, but because someone had finally seen me. Someone had finally reached back. The next morning, I interviewed with her manager. Oh, it wasn't a glamorous job. The pay was low, the hours were uncertain, but it was the first real step out of the hole I'd been buried in. I started working part-time that week. The routine was clunky at first, balancing job tasks while still hustling side gigs to cover basic expenses. But it gave me something I hadn't felt in months: momentum. Elena never treated me like a charity case. She treated me like a friend, like family. She made space for me not just in her apartment, but in her life. And slowly, painfully, I began to rebuild. It would take more than a job to heal me, but in that moment, it was enough to start. It was enough to remind me that maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. Sometimes, it just takes one person to throw you a rope when you've been drowning in silence. For me, that person was Elena, and she changed everything. There's a certain power in starting from nothing, because when you have nothing, everything you build is yours. The job Elena helped me find wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the high-paying corporate position I had lost. It didn't come with benefits or a fancy title. But, to me, it felt like a life raft. It was the first step toward reclaiming something I thought I'd lost forever: my dignity. I remember my first day vividly. The office was small, tucked above a corner coffee shop with mismatched chairs and secondhand desks that wobbled if you leaned too hard on them. But no one cared about the furniture. We cared about building something. The energy in the room was scrappy, alive, hopeful. In a way, that office reflected me, perfectly beaten up, but still standing. My initial tasks were humble: filing, data entry, scheduling client meetings. But I didn't complain, not once. I showed up early. I stayed late. I volunteered for everything no one else wanted to do. I needed them to see that I wasn't just grateful, I was essential. There was a fire inside me, one I didn't know I had before I lost everything. I wasn't just trying to succeed. I was fighting to prove to myself more than anyone that I could build something from the ashes. Each small paycheck felt monumental. I tracked every cent in a worn notebook, budgeting with the precision of a surgeon. I bought groceries in bulk. While I walked to work whenever possible to save gas, I clipped coupons like it was my religion. Boy, I still picked up gig work on the side, bartending on weekends, cleaning office spaces at dawn. I worked because I couldn't afford not to. Slowly, I began to piece my life back together. Elena's couch became my safe place for several months. She never made me feel like a burden. We laughed over late-night instant noodles, swapped stories about difficult clients, and built a rhythm that felt natural. She became my chosen family long before I fully understood what that meant. But I knew I couldn't live on her couch forever. Every night after my shifts, I scrolled through rental listings I could barely afford. I wasn't searching for a dream home, I just wanted 4 walls and a door that locked. A place where I could sit on my own furniture, even if it was just a mattress on the floor. Eventually, I found it a tiny studio apartment in a part of town most people wouldn't walk through after dark. The building was old. The pipes groaned when I used the sink, and sometimes the heat cut out in the middle of the night. But the first time I turned the key in the door, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: pride. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I remember sitting on the bare floor that first night, eating takeout straight from the container, thinking, this is my restart. No one had handed me this life. No one had saved me. I had built this on my own, at the startup, I pushed harder. I wasn't content with just doing the minimum. I taught myself new skills in the evenings: SEO, content marketing analytics, anything that would make me indispensable. I watched free tutorials online until my eyes blurred. I volunteered for cross department projects that forced me out of my comfort zone. I asked for feedback relentlessly, always wanting to be better, sharper, faster. The company's founder, a woman named Rachel, noticed. "You've got grit," she told me one afternoon after I closed a small but difficult client deal. Most people wouldn't have stuck it out through what you've been through. I didn't know how to respond. Compliments like that felt foreign after months of rejection and silence. But I held on to her words like armor. Eventually, my hours increased. My responsibilities grew. My paychecks got a little bigger. And I finally reached a place where I could exhale not fully, but just enough to feel the ground solid beneath my feet again. But stability wasn't enough. I wanted to build something that couldn't be ripped away from me. So I hustled harder. I picked up a weekend bartending job at a dive bar called Copper Alley. The shifts were long, the customers were unpredictable, but the tips were decent. I learned how to mix drinks, break up arguments, and move like lightning behind the bar. There were nights when my legs trembled from exhaustion, when I came home too tired to even take off my shoes. But I kept going. Every dollar I earned had a purpose savings debt security. Some nights, the loneliness crept in. I missed the version of me that once had dinner with her family, that once thought a job loss would be met with open arms and support instead of slammed doors. But then I'd remind myself that I wasn't that version anymore. I was becoming someone new, someone I respected. I still remember the night I paid off the last of my overdue credit card bills. It was a small balance, but clearing it felt monumental. I sat at my rickety kitchen table, staring at the payment confirm screen, and felt tears fill my eyes. It wasn't just about money. It was proof I could dig myself out. As I rebuilt my life, I found myself forming new connections, people who didn't share my last name, but showed up for me in ways my own family never had. Regulars at the bar who offered words of encouragement, co-workers who became late-night study buddies, and Elena, who never stopped reminding me that I was more than my worst day. Brick by brick, I was building a life that belonged entirely to me. And the best part, no one could take it away. I had spent years learning to live without them. And then, one day, they just showed up at my door. It was a quiet Saturday morning, one of those rare, peaceful moments where I finally felt like I was breathing in the life I had built. I had just finished brewing my coffee and was getting ready to take my usual weekend walk through the neighborhood when I heard the doorbell. At first, I thought it was a delivery. I wasn't expecting anyone. My life by design had become simple and carefully protected. I wasn't the kind of person who got surprise visitors anymore. Not since I learned how much unexpected knocks could cost you. But when I opened the door, I froze. There they were. My mother, my father, Brandon, his wife Jessica, their 2 children, and behind them, luggage. Lots of it. They smiled as if this was a perfectly normal family visit. "Kimberly." My mother chirped, stepping forward like she expected me to pull her into a hug. "Look at you. You've been so busy, we figured it was time to stop by and catch up in person." I didn't move. I didn't hug her. I didn't even step aside. My father gave a short nod, already glancing over my shoulder into my home. "Nice place. Quiet neighborhood. Looks like you've done well for yourself. Brandon looked down at his kids. Say hello to your Aunt Kimberly. His son mumbled something. His daughter stared up at me like I was a stranger, which I was. They hadn't seen me in years. I barely recognized them. The silence stretched until Jessica broke it with a saccharine smile. It's chilly out here. We've been driving all morning. Mind if we come in? On autopilot, I stepped aside. I should have closed the door. I should have asked why they were there. But I was caught somewhere between shock and old automatic politeness. I didn't know yet that I was inviting a storm into my home. They entered like they belonged. My father tapped the walls with his knuckles as if testing their strength. My mother drifted into my kitchen, commenting on my interesting cabinet color choice. Brandon's kids raced up the stairs before I could stop them. Jessica, of course, started taking photos on her phone. Such a cute little place, she said, emphasizing little in a way that felt like a punch to the gut. It didn't take long before the kids started bouncing on my bed, opening drawers, claiming rooms, as if I had invited them to stay. I followed them upstairs, trying to keep my voice steady. Please don't jump on that bed, that's mine. Emma Brandon's daughter grinned. Daddy says this is going to be our room. I get the big bed because I'm older. Jacob's gonna sleep on the floor mattress. I froze. Our room. I led them back downstairs, feeling like I was moving through someone else's life. In the living room, the adults had comfortably settled in my father, helping himself to coffee from my kitchen. My mother perched on my couch. Brandon flipping through a magazine I'd left on the table. What's going on? I finally asked. My mother smiled as if the answer was obvious. We've missed you, sweetheart. Family should stick together, especially during hard times. Hard times, I echoed, though something cold was already settling in my stomach. Brandon cleared his throat. Yeah, we've hit a rough patch. I lost my job a few months ago. Jessica's working part-time, but it's not enough. Rent's gone up again. Honestly, we can't afford the apartment anymore. My mother chimed in. And your father and I, well, the market hasn't been kind to our retirement fund. We sold the house. You what? I asked, the words scraping out of my throat. We needed the cash, my father said bluntly. But the condo we're moving into won't be ready for several months. Jessica walked back in from the kitchen. Anyway, your place is perfect for all of us. It has plenty of space, and the basement would work great for you. You can make it cozy. I stared at them. My house, my sanctuary. They weren't asking. They had already decided. Kim Brandon added almost gently, like he was trying to be reasonable. You don't have a family to worry about. No husband, no kids. You've got all this space, and we're your family. We need you. I was so stunned, so blindsided, that for a moment, I couldn't even form a sentence. They had abandoned me when I was drowning. Now they wanted to move in to claim the life I'd fought like hell to build. It wasn't just entitlement. It was expectation. They weren't here to ask. They were here to take. Jessica looked around as if already imagining their furniture in my space. We'll start bringing our stuff tomorrow while you're at work. Can we get a copy of your key? I felt the blood drain from my face. I heard the faint buzzing of my phone in my pocket. It was Nathan, a friend I had met at work, texting to confirm our dinner plans. I answered quickly. Family situation. Can you come here instead? I need backup. His reply came instantly. On my way. When Nathan arrived, their polite mass cracked. My father interrogated him about his job and his savings. My mother beamed at the idea that I might finally be settling down with someone. Brandon seemed completely unfazed, pressing on with his plan, as if Nathan's presence changed nothing. Over dinner set with my dishes arranged without my permission, Brandon dropped the final bomb. We've given notice. Our lease ends in 2 weeks. We'll move in here. It's just practical. I put my fork down carefully. I knew in that moment this wasn't a visit. This was a takeover. The same people who had turned their backs on me when I needed them most now expected me to hand over everything I had built without them. And they saw nothing wrong with that. They didn't just want a place to stay. They wanted to rewrite my life to fit their needs. The longer they stayed in my house that day, the clearer their true intentions became. My family hadn't come to visit. They hadn't come to reconnect. They had come to claim. It was like watching someone carefully rearrange your life right in front of you while speaking in soft, reasonable tones, as if they were doing you a favor. Jessica started mentally redecorating the living room, listing which of my furniture pieces would have to go to make space for their things. She snapped more photos on her phone as if cataloging the house. This couch, too small for a family. We'll bring our sectional, much more practical. My mother chimed in from the dining room, already talking about replacing my table. It only seats 4. That won't work for all of us. We'll need something bigger. Even my father got involved, wandering through the house, opening closet doors, checking window locks, and making comments about my inefficient thermostat settings. Brandon's kids kept running wild, leaving muddy footprints, touching everything, bouncing on the chairs I'd bought, secondhand and carefully restored. At one point, I caught Jacob tugging open drawers in my office. "That's not a toy, sweetie," I said, trying to stay calm. "Please be careful," Emma chimed in without hesitation. "It's okay. Daddy says this is going to be our playroom." Their confidence was staggering. Their assumption that all of this would soon belong to them was both horrifying and surreal. I finally pulled Brandon aside and asked him directly, "What exactly is the plan here? Are you expecting me to just give you the house?" He sighed like I was being difficult. "No one's taking anything from you, Kim. You'll still be here just in the basement. It's finished right. There's a little bathroom down there. It'll work. You want me to move into my own basement? Well, yeah. You've got the whole house. And you don't need this much space, let's be honest. It's not like you have a husband or kids. We're the ones with responsibilities. You know, a real family. That phrase, a real family, hit me like a punch. In that moment, all the old memories came flooding back. The time I lent him money when he was between jobs. The times I dropped everything to babysit his kids so he and Jessica could go out. The countless ways I had shown up for him when he needed me. And now I was being told that I didn't qualify as a real family. That I didn't matter. That I should give up the life I'd fought to rebuild just because they decided I didn't deserve to keep it. He kept talking as if this was all perfectly reasonable. "Look, we'll need your bedroom, obviously. The kids can share the smaller room. Mom and Dad will take the second bedroom upstairs. You'll be fine downstairs. You can make it cozy." My father chimed in later. "Hotels are expensive. It doesn't make sense for us to waste money on that when you have all this room." Even my mother, Her voice, soft and sweet, added, "It's just temporary, honey. 6 months, maybe a year. We'll all help each other." But I wasn't fooled by her gentle tone. I had learned the hard way that their help always ran one way. Jessica pointed out that I wouldn't need my office anymore because the dining table was perfectly suitable for work. "You're barely home anyway. You're always working." They had thought through every detail. My bedroom, my workspace, my furniture, my schedule, everything was open for negotiation in their minds. And the worst part, they had already told the extended family I had agreed to all of this. My Aunt Margaret called that same evening. "Your father told me about your generous offer to take everyone in." "That's wonderful, Kim. The whole family's talking about how you've really stepped up." Stepped up, I hadn't agreed to anything. They had written me into a story I hadn't signed up for. Nathan, who had stayed by my side throughout the dinner, quietly squeezed my hand under the table, as if to anchor me to remind me that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't overreacting. When he left that night, I called my closest friend, Elena. I barely got the words out. "They're trying to move in. They've already decided where everyone's going to sleep. They've told people I agreed." She didn't hesitate. "I'm coming over. We'll figure this out." Within an hour, Elena and another friend from work, Marcus, were sitting in my living room with me, brainstorming. Stephanie, another friend from the bar, joined via speakerphone. "You need to document everything Elena said firmly. Every conversation, every text. Don't let them manipulate this." Marcus started looking up tenant laws. If you let them stay even a night, they could claim residency. You need to be careful. Once they're in, it's a whole legal mess to get them out. Stephanie suggested recording all conversations moving forward. One-party consent was legal in our state. We stayed up late building a plan. They were calm. I was shaking. "They don't see what they're doing as wrong," I whispered. "They genuinely think this is their right." "They abandoned you," Marcus said quietly. "And now they're trying to steal what you've rebuilt. That's not family. That's opportunism." By the time they left, I had a notebook ready to document everything. I had printed copies of old text messages, ones where Brandon had told me to stop contacting them, where he made it clear I was on my own. I knew this wasn't over. I knew they would come back tomorrow, expecting to move their things in. They had no backup plan. They didn't need one. They were counting on me folding, but I was no longer the woman who slept in her car hoping someone would call. I had built this life. I had built this home. And I wasn't about to hand it over to the people who had left me to survive on my own. Not now, not ever. There comes a moment when you stop asking for respect and start taking it back. I barely slept that night. I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, writing furiously at documenting everything. Every conversation, every text, every cruel dismissal, every time they left me stranded. I printed screenshots from years ago, messages I had buried, but never deleted proof of the silence they gave me when I needed them most. I wasn't angry in the way I expected. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't shaking with rage. I was steady, focused, determined. I'd begged for their support once, and they had left me in the dark. This time, I wouldn't beg. This time, I would be the one to close the door at Eitzel A. I texted them, Let's meet at noon to discuss living arrangements. They replied within seconds, full of gratitude, as if the matter had already been settled. My mother even added that they would bring measurements for furniture. It was astonishing how quickly they claimed my house like I had simply been holding it for them all this time. But I had no intention of giving it away. I spent the morning preparing. I locked away my valuables and personal documents. I set up my laptop on the kitchen counter to discreetly record our meeting. I made one pot of coffee, nothing else. This wasn't going to be a social visit. Before they arrived, I sent a group text to my closest friends, Elena, Nathan, and Marcus. They're coming soon. Please stay nearby in case I need you. Their responses came instantly. We're parked down the street. We're ready. You've got this. You're not alone. When my family arrived at noon, they brought even more luggage than the day before. Brandon's kids were already running toward the backyard like they'd lived there their whole lives. Jessica walked in with a box labeled kitchen supplies. My father started directing Brandon on where to stack their belongings. I didn't let them fully settle in. Before we go any further, I said steady but firm, "Let's sit down in the living room. We need to talk." They exchanged confused glances but complied. I remained standing. I took a deep breath. 3 years ago, I lost my job. I reached out to each of you. I asked for help, not for a handout, just temporary support. Do you remember what you told me? My mother shifted uncomfortably. My father stared at the carpet. Brandon crossed his arms but said nothing. Mom, I continued, my voice unwavering. You told me you'd pray for me, but couldn't help. You suggested I cut back on fancy lattes, even though I was living on instant coffee and ramen. Dad, when I called you, you said, you should have saved better. Your generation always expects handouts. And then you hung up on me. I turned to Brandon. You told me, you don't have a real family to worry about. You only have yourself. And the next day, you texted me not to contact you until I got my life together. You told me you were tired of bailing me out. But you never bailed me out. Not once. I pulled out the printed screenshots, carefully laying them on the coffee table. This is what you said to me. This is how you treated me. My mother's eyes welled up with tears. Kimberly, that was a long time ago. No, I said, cutting her off. It wasn't that long ago when I was living in my car, when I was showering at a gym, brushing my teeth in public restrooms, and eating dollar store granola bars for dinner. Not one of you called. Not one of you offered a couch. You all watched me fall and you walked away. Brandon started to argue, but I raised my hand to stop him. And now you think you can walk back into my life and move into my home, as if nothing happened. You've told the extended family I agreed to this. You assumed I'd fold. I handed Brandon a business card. I arranged a meeting for you with a financial advisor. She specializes in helping families in difficult situations. She can help you find solutions because this house is not one of them. My father's face turned red. After everything we've done for you, this is how you treat your family. I met his glare with calm certainty. Family shows up when you need them. Family doesn't abandon you when you're on your knees. Family doesn't resurface only when it's convenient. My mother sobbed, begging me to reconsider. Jessica stood silent, clutching the financial advisor's card tightly, realizing she might be the only one thinking practically. Brandon's expression hardened. You'll regret this. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. I smiled sadly. Tell them everything. Make sure you include the part where you left me homeless and now you expect me to give up my home. As I spoke, Nathan, Elena, and Marcus walked in right on cue. My real family. These are the people who showed up when you didn't. These are the people who helped me rebuild. Brandon's jaw clenched. My father muttered something about ungrateful children. But I stayed firm. I'm going to need the spare key back, I said, holding out my hand. After a long pause, my father dug into his pocket and reluctantly dropped it into my palm. I stepped aside, holding the door open. It's time for you to go. They gathered their things slowly, Brandon, dragging his feet, Jessica quietly packing their boxes, my mother sobbing, but no longer trying to convince me. When they finally walked out, when I finally closed the door behind them, the silence was deafening. But this time it felt like peace. It felt like freedom. Nathan put his hand on my shoulder. You okay? I exhaled, tears stinging the back of my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I said, I think I really am. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't slamming the door. It's finding peace on the other side of it. The days following that confrontation were strangely quiet, but not the kind of silence I'd grown used to. It wasn't the crushing silence of abandonment or the hollow silence of being forgotten. This silence was different. It was the sound of space I had reclaimed. It was mine now. Every room in my house echoed with my own decisions, not the noise of people who had once tried to take it from me. But I'd be lying if I said it was easy. Even after they left, the emotional warfare didn't stop. My father called repeatedly, leaving a string of voicemails that oscillated between furious accusations and half-hearted negotiations. You've made a terrible mistake, he said in one message. Maybe we can pay a little rent, he offered in another. You'll regret turning your back on your family, he threatened in the next. My mother's messages were laced with guilt, her voice cracking under the weight of her performance. I can't sleep, Kimberly, knowing you've shut us out. We're your family. Brandon didn't call. Instead, he took to social media, posting cryptic quotes about selfish siblings and the death of family loyalty, carefully designed to cast me as the villain without ever using my name. It didn't matter, I knew who those posts were meant for. I stopped responding. I didn't block them. I wanted them to see me living, thriving, unbothered. But it wasn't just attacks. There were surprising allies, too. Aunt Margaret called me. I heard what happened. She said without preamble, Your mother's telling everyone you threw them out on the street when they came to you in their time of need. I braced for another guilt trip. Instead, she surprised me. I told her she was full of it. She continued, I remember how they treated you when you lost your job. I should have reached out back then. I believed her when she said you wanted space. I won't make that mistake again. Her words cracked something in me I didn't know I was still holding. Later, my cousin Edward called. Look, I'm not taking sides, he said carefully. But I know there's more to this story than what Uncle Richard is telling people. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Those small moments of validation meant more than they probably realized. They reminded me I hadn't imagined the betrayal. I hadn't made it bigger than it was. What happened to me was real, and it mattered. But more than anything, it was my chosen family who carried me through the aftermath. Nathan showed up nearly every evening, sometimes with dinner, sometimes just to sit in comfortable silence. Elena checked in constantly, making sure I was eating, making sure I was sleeping. Marcus made it his personal mission to ensure work didn't overwhelm me during the emotional storm. Stephanie, my firecracker of a friend, brought over ice cream and comedies, declaring mandatory laughter nights and refusing to let me sink back into bitterness. 2 weeks after the confrontation, we gathered at my house for what Stephanie dubbed our chosen family celebration dinner. I still had the same small dining table my mother had once deemed too insignificant for a real family. But when I looked around at my friends, that table had never felt fuller. Nathan raised his glass in a quiet toast. To Kimberly, who taught me what real courage looks like. Standing up to strangers is hard, but standing up to family, that takes something else. Marcus grinned and added, which is why I want to make it official. I've been meaning to tell you, partnership at the company. You've earned it 100 times over. The room erupted in cheers. I could barely process it. A partnership, stability, recognition, not just survival, but a future. Stephanie was the first to recover. Okay, but can we talk about a chosen family vacation? Preferably somewhere with a beach, unlimited snacks, and zero family drama. We laughed, and in that moment, I realized something I hadn't fully accepted. Before, I had not just rebuilt my life, I had redefined it. Over the next few months, I set boundaries with the few biological relatives I chose to keep limited contact with Aunt Margaret and Edward. I didn't cut everyone out, but I became ruthlessly selective about who earned space in my life. Brandon, he never reached out again, not directly. His silence was his final statement. And strangely, it didn't sting the way I thought it would. Some doors once closed stay closed for good. Therapy helped me untangle the last knots of guilt. Forgiveness doesn't mean you open the door again, my therapist said. Forgiveness is something you do for your own peace, not for their comfort. I began redecorating my house one room at a time. I painted my spare bedroom a bold terracotta, a color my mother would have hated. I installed bookshelves along the living room wall and proudly displayed my mismatched collection of novels. I bought a bright teal couch that made me smile every time I walked into the room. Each choice whispered, "This is mine. I chose this. I built this." 3 months later, I was updating my emergency contact forms at the doctor's office. My old paperwork still listed my father. Without hesitation, I crossed out his name and wrote 3. Instead, Nathan, Elena, and Marcus. The receptionist looked up. Most people list one person. You're putting 3. I guess I'm lucky. I smiled. I have more than one person I can count on. As I drove home, that day, it hit me. I had been abandoned. I had been left with nothing. But I had built something better. Family isn't defined by last names or bloodlines. It's defined by who shows up, who stays, who loves you when there's nothing in it for them. The girl they abandoned needed them. The woman I became did not. And that was my greatest victory. If there's one thing I've learned from this journey, it's that family isn't always who you're born to. It's who shows up. For most of my life, I believed that family came with unconditional love, a built-in safety net, and people who would stand by me when the ground collapsed beneath me. I clung to that belief even when all the evidence told me otherwise. And when I finally faced the harsh truth that my biological family would not be there for me, I realized something that changed my life. I had the power to choose who I allowed into my heart, into my home, and into my future. It's one of the hardest lessons I've ever had to learn. Sometimes the people closest to you by blood can also be the ones who hurt you the deepest, not through explosive arguments, but through absence dismissal and silence when you need them most. I used to think that standing up to strangers took courage. I never imagined that standing up to my own family would take far more. But I've come to understand that boundaries aren't walls. They're doors with locks. You get to choose who you open them for. You get to decide who earns the right to step into your life. Setting boundaries doesn't make you cold. It doesn't make you heartless. It makes you whole. It protects the life you've worked hard to build, especially when you've clawed your way out of a place no one else thought you could escape. For anyone who's ever felt obligated to keep giving to people who only know how to take, please hear me. When I say this, you don't owe anyone access to your peace. Love, even within families, should be mutual. Support should go both ways. And if it doesn't, you have every right to step back to protect your heart and to choose people who choose you back. It took me years to realize that forgiveness isn't about letting someone back in. Forgiveness is about freeing yourself from the grip of resentment. It's about saying you no longer control my story. You no longer define my worth. You can forgive someone and still walk away. You can wish them well and still close the door behind them. That's not cruelty. That's self-respect. Through all of this, I found that you can build your own family. Sometimes they come to you as friends, colleagues, or even people you meet by chance. What matters is that they show up when it counts. They celebrate your victories. They hold space for your pain. They don't come with conditions or expectations, they just come with loyalty and care. Looking back, I wouldn't erase what I went through. The heartbreak, the silence, the lonely nights, it shaped me. It showed me who I could become when I stopped waiting for someone else to save me. I became my own rescue. So, if you're standing where I once stood, if you're wondering whether it's okay to put yourself first, whether it's okay to say no to people who share your DNA but not your values, I hope you know that it's more than okay. It's necessary. You deserve to protect what you've built. You deserve to be surrounded by people who value you, not people who view you as a convenience. And if you haven't found your chosen family yet, keep going. They're out there. Sometimes they appear when you least expect it, but you'll know them by how they make you feel safe, supported, and finally, home. I'm living proof that you can walk away from those who abandoned you, and you can walk towards something better, something you create, something you choose.